So recently I've been trying to expand my skill set as far as melody making goes, and I've specifically become very interested in the sort of like R&B vintage soul type of sound. I watch a lot of other music producer content on YouTube from people like Kavi, Keon, Lucid Beats, Max Shooter, and there's a bunch more. I've been learning a ton of stuff from their videos as far as this type of sound goes, and I highly recommend anybody else who is interested in learning this type to go watch their content. So for this video, I want to break down this R&B vintage sample that I made a couple days ago and just kind of walk you guys through some of the stuff that I've learned over the past couple of months while trying to learn to make these types of samples. So without further ado, this is how I would make a vintage R&B sample. So this video is going to be a little bit different only because it's just going to be a sample breakdown. I don't really want to focus on like the drum side of things. I just kind of want to go over the melody portions. So you guys just heard the sample in the preview, so we're just going to hop right into the deconstructed. First thing, we're starting at 124. So typically what I've seen is that a lot of these R&B type of samples usually range in a very much slower BPM, anywhere usually from like 100 BPM to like 125, 130. That area is kind of like the sweet spot. So this was the first MIDI that I laid down, and the preset I'm using is in Anlog Lab, and it's the key drunk texting preset. And this is actually from a Kavi kit, the Confessions 2 kit. So something I want to touch on right away is the use of empty space for these types of loops. You can notice in this section, I completely stopped the chords and it kind of just lets the melody breathe a little bit. And I also introduced these two little like kind of top notes as grace notes. So the importance of letting the melody breathe and then reintroducing it with just a small, simple top line to kind of drive back into where it starts again. So as far as the chords go, it's pretty simple. All I did was came up here and got a major 7th chord. So we have a C major 7, and then I got a minor chord, a minor 7th chord, and I put it here. It's a B minor 7th. And then all I did was I just removed the F and then pitched this D note up one. And that kind of gives it like a little bit more of a dark tension type of feel. And pitching that D note up to the D sharp just kind of gave the melody a little bit more color. And then like I said before, I just have a couple of like kind of passing notes to get from one chord to the next. A big goal for these melodies is to play them how they would actually be played on like a real keyboard. So you don't want to cram the MIDI with a ton of notes because that's not really realistic to somebody that would actually be playing this on a real piano. And another thing to keep it really simple is that I basically just used a couple of these notes as the passing notes. So if I pitch this down, you can see that I just took this B, the G, and then this B down here, just pitched them up one. So you're using a lot of the same notes, but just in different octaves. So now we move on to the bass. And for the bass, I'm using another Anlog Lab preset. This is the Jasper bass. And this is coming from a Louis Flynn and XY Nothing kit, the Impulse Bank. So you can really hear it in the bass where you have this kind of gap for nothing to play at all. It really just adds a lot of tension. For the types of basses in these loops, I feel like you can go two different ways. You can either go that super like heavy synthetic, sort of like Reese bass type of sound, sort of the more analog approach, or you could go with like a normal bass guitar. I chose the analog route for this one just because I felt like it matched the first preset that we had. And these notes just follow the root notes of the original MIDI that I played. Then the next thing we got was another Anlog Lab sound, and this is Key's Keep in Touch preset. And this is from the same Kavi kit, the Confessions 2. So So this is the first lead that we're introducing. And to me, it kind of acts as like a nice little melodic accent to the beginning of the loop. It almost kind of sounds like a female vocal a little bit, which is why I liked this preset. And like I said before, you'll notice that a lot of these like leads and all these midis, a lot of the notes are very compact together. So we only are using 3 notes here. You know, you're not gonna like stretch across the entirety of like 2 octaves and do all these crazy notes for these samples, because they really got to remain simple and just have a nice feeling to them. So this next sound, we have another lead from Anlog Lab. It's the lead 6 slide, and it's also from that Kavi kit. And for this one, I'm just playing one simple note, but it's a very important note because it acts as a filler period for when the original MIDI has that blank space. So this note acts as a good sort of like call and response, where the original MIDI is playing up until this 4th bar, and then it stops, and then you have a note kind of fill in that gap. So it still creates that element of tension because you're taking away a different sound and then like reintroducing one small sound for a small section. So that sound by itself just sounds like this. But when you hear it with the other sounds, it kind of has a lot of importance to it. So the next sound we got is another Anlog Lab preset, and this is from the Analog Blueprints 2. And this is by Keon. If you're gonna get into these types of sounds, I would highly recommend going to get kits from the people I mentioned in the intro. All of the Kavi analog banks, the Keon banks, and the Max Shooter banks are incredible for this type of production. So we just have these 4 notes that step up at the beginning. These notes again just act as a nice little accent. Then the next thing we got is this Zenology String, and this is the small strings preset. I pretty much add a string in any R&B or vintage sample that I make now, just because it adds a super nice like real high end to the melody, which is a nice contrast because usually the type of presets you pick for these types of loops are very drowned out and kind of, they have that like underwater feel. Then the next thing I added was this organ preset from Zenology, the Perk rotary organ. And this was used just to layer the chords with the original MIDI to just kind of give them a little bit more warmth. So the next thing I added was this piano from Zenology, and I really used this to add some other level of melodic element for a B section. So this was kind of like the first real melodic element to introduce into the second half. So a really good melodic layer, but still maintaining a lot of that empty space to cause even more tension. And then the final thing I added was this percussion loop from a Kavi kit. And I usually add these in any sort of R&B or vintage sample, just because in theory, if this were to be a real sample, it would have probably had some sort of acoustic drums over it. So this is just kind of like a really nice sort of background accent that you can tuck into these loops to kind of give them a little bit more rhythm. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the sample. Now, what I usually like to do is after I arrange it and render it all out, I will take the sample and route it to a mixer channel. And then you can see over here, I have a ton of different effects on it to kind of give it like the final touches. Processing for these loops is very important because you want them to have that sort of worn down old feel. So first off, I just have this EQ to kind of cut some sections that I felt like were too harsh. Then I added just a tape plugin. This one is the Tape Mellowfy from Arturia. And all I'm really doing is kind of turning the flutter and the wow up. And that is gonna give this sample a little bit of detuning, almost as if you were to have ran it through a real tape machine. And then also this filter is just kind of cutting off a little bit of the highs to give it that more underwater feel like I said before. I'm also using this Cymatics Origin plugin. I use this plugin to add a little bit of saturation, a little bit more detuning, and then this main knob here just kind of removes some frequencies from the sample, and then I just have another EQ to kind of clean up some other stuff. So yeah, that's what the entire sample consists of. Let me know if you guys like these types of samples. I've been making a ton of them recently, and I have a bunch more I could break down for you guys if you would like to see that. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you guys liked this style of video where I just cover the melody. I feel like I can go into a little bit more depth of maybe my thought process while making these versus when I do them with the beat at the end. I feel like I'm kind of like flying through it a lot of the times. But yeah, that's gonna do it for me, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.